إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So we were coming to the end of the chapter regarding tayammum, coming to the end of the section regarding tayammum. So for the last 2 or 3 sessions, we've gone over some of the ahadith connected to the issue of tayammum, when it is allowed, how it is to be done, whether tayammum is equivalent to wudu or is it a temporary substitute for wudu only. That is one of the main topics when it comes to tayammum. When you make tayammum, does it equate completely, equally to being upon the normal state of wudu? Or is it something lesser than that, just enough temporarily to cover you? There were 2 opinions. One opinion was that tayammum, it covers you completely and equally, just like wudu. So when you make tayammum, you can pray your current prayer, you can pray the next prayer. Tayammum removes your hadath. It is rafi'un lil hadath. Whereas the other opinion was tayammum is only a temporary measure. That if you're unable to use water or there is no water available, then you can make tayammum and make do with it as a temporary measure up until water is found. So then when water is found, you have to then make the proper wudu and can no longer continue upon the tayammum. So I believe we got to the last hadith that we did last time. I believe was the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu. قال خرج رجلان في سفر فحضرت الصلاة وليس معهما ماء فتيمما صعيدا طيبا فصليا ثم وجد الماء في الوقت فأعاد أحدهما الصلاة والوضوء ولم يعد الآخر ثم أتيا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فذكرا ذلك له فقال للذي لم يعد أصبت السنة وأجزأتك صلاتك وقال للآخر لك الأجر مرتين. This was the last hadith we did. The hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu. He said, 2 men, they went out on a journey and the time for the prayer came. The time for the prayer entered as they were gone out on their journey somewhere, and they did not have any water with them. So they're out in the middle of nowhere on their journey, no water anywhere, and they don't have any water with them. And the time for the prayer has come. So what did they do? Tayammama sa'idan tayyiba. So then, of course, in that circumstance where there is no water available, then they made tayammum. Because you remember from the first lesson about tayammum, we mentioned tayammum can be done when there is no water available. There's no water available anywhere. Or if water is available but you cannot use it for some reason. Tayammum can be done in that circumstance too. Water is available, but you cannot use it for some reason. That reason, there are many reasons. It could be because of your medical situation, some type of health-related issue. You cannot use the water. It could also be due to cold weather. I suppose it can be like a subcategory of your health and medical situation, that the cold weather, it is so severe, if you use the water, it could impact upon you, cause you to become ill, etc. Any other reasons why you might not be able to use the water? Contamination, then the water is impermissible to use in the first place. I suppose that's possible as well. Danger to your life, meaning that you cannot access the water. You remember they mention in the examples in the books of fiqh, you might be there out in the jungle or the desert or the savannah somewhere, and there is a lake of water. You can see it right in front of you. But all around that lake, there are lions drinking. So how are you going to go into that lake and make wudu? You can go in, but you won't come out. So now in that case, it's impossible to access the water and use it, even though it is available. There are other things they mention in the books of fiqh. They say perhaps between you and access to the water is your enemy. Maybe the water, you know where it is, it's just round the block over there, but you can't get to it. Your enemy is within you, between you and that water, and you cannot access it. They mention also examples. Imagine you are held hostage or tied up. You're being held hostage or tied up onto a pillar, and the water's right there, 2 meters, 3 meters ahead of you. Right there's a bowl. But you can't get to it. You're tied up on the pillar. You're held hostage or whatever's going on. So there could be lots of reasons why water is available, but you cannot use it for a variety of reasons. Then in that case again, tayammum would be permissible. And the other obvious reason, when water isn't available in the first place. So in this case, they were out journeying and there was no water available in the first place. So they made tayammum. And then they prayed. They made tayammum and they prayed. Then afterwards, as they continued journeying, they happened to come across some water. They happened to come across some water. And it was still within the time of the prayer they had just prayed. So imagine at 12:30, these days Dhuhr comes maybe 12:30 approximately. At 12:30 they think to themselves, Dhuhr time has come in. So they look around, there's no water, so they make tayammum and they pray. Then they carry on their journey. So now there's still an hour and a half till Asr comes in, 2 p.m. these days, thereabouts. So imagine they were walking, 1:15, they come across water. So they are still in the time of Dhuhr yet, and they found water. So now, is their Dhuhr that they prayed upon tayammum half an hour ago when the time came in, is it valid? Or do they now have to make wudu now that they have got water and it's within the time, and pray the prayer again? That is the difference of opinion between the scholars. In the narration, what did they do? When they came across the water and it was still within the time of the prayer, فَأَعَادَ أَحَدُهُمَا الصَّلَاةِ وَالْوُضُوء. One of the two men decided, now that we found water, I need to repeat. So he made proper wudu with the water that was now available and then prayed that prayer again. وَلَمْ يُعِيدِ الْآخَرِ. But the other man didn't. He didn't make wudu with the water that they had now found. He didn't repeat his prayer. He left it at the prayer that he'd already prayed upon tayammum, believing that's valid. There was no water at the time. We made tayammum, we prayed. It's valid. So he didn't repeat his prayer. Then afterwards, when they got back from the journey, they came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they mentioned to him what happened. They mentioned that story to him. And they mentioned to him that one of them, I repeated my prayer, made wudu with the water once we found it. The other one said, I didn't. I believe the original prayer was valid upon tayammum. So the Prophet ﷺ said to the one who did not repeat the prayer again, who left it at the original prayer upon tayammum, the Messenger said to him, أصبت السنة وأجزأتك الصلاة أو صلاتك. That you have done the sunnah and your prayer is sufficient for you. You've done the sunnah and your prayer counts. The Messenger said that to the one who had not repeated the prayer again after they found water within the time of the prayer. Messenger said to him, you've done the sunnah and your prayer counts for you. Then the Messenger said to the other one, the one who had repeated the prayer, لَكَ الْأَجْرُ مَرَّتَيْنِ. That for you is the reward twice. For you is the reward twice. This narration then, as Shaykh al-Fawzan, he mentions the first benefit we can take from it is the obvious, which is مشروعية التيمم عند عدم الماء. The legislation, the Sharia tells us that you can make tayammum when there is no water available. What's the evidence in the hadith that proves that? Exactly, that's what they did. The two of them, when they didn't find any water, they knew that the ruling now Islamically is to make tayammum and pray, and that's what they did. So in the legislation we know that is the ruling. When there is no water found, then you make tayammum and pray. Secondly, the second benefit, أن من وجد الماء بعدما صلى بالتيمم لا يعيد الصلاة ولو كان قبل خروج الوقت. The second benefit from this narration is that if the time for a prayer comes in and you cannot find any water, so you make tayammum and pray. Later on, if you do find water and it's still within the same prayer time yet, the hadith tells us it is not an obligation upon you to have to then make the full wudu with the water that you've now found and then repeat the prayer again. You don't have to do that. لأنه أدم عليه وإنما يبطل التيمم بوجود الماء إذا كان قبل الصلاة. Notice in the hadith one very important point. They found the water when? When did they find it? Before or after the prayer time had entered? After. Because when the prayer time entered originally, they had no water, the prayer time entered. So they had prayed with tayammum. Then later on, they found the water. So they found the water definitely after the prayer time had entered. And so their original prayer was valid upon tayammum. But if you found water before the prayer time entered, then obviously you would not be able to pray that prayer upon tayammum, because you already found the water before the prayer time even entered yet. You have the water there ready, prepared. So you've got to make wudu now for the prayer coming up. You cannot now say, I didn't have water. You have the water now. So here the point was, they found the water after the prayer time had entered, and they had already prayed upon tayammum. وعليه يحمل قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم فإذا وجد الماء فليتق الله وليمس بشرته. And the previous narration that we came across, where the messenger said, when a person finds water, then let him fear Allah and touch that upon his skin, meaning let him make the wudu. So some of the scholars may use that narration and they'll say, look, the messenger said, when you find water, then fear Allah and put it to your skin, meaning make the wudu with it. Some of them may use that and say, look, that's the proof why you are supposed to then make the wudu and repeat your prayer. But others, they say, no, the meaning of this narration is that if you find the water prior to the prayer entering, or that you find the water after the prayer time has entered, but you have not yet made tayammum and prayed, you were still maybe looking at and you found the water. So in those cases, that's the meaning of the narration. In those cases, you have to use the water and make the full wudu and pray. But in the case where the time enters and you look and you don't find water, then you can make tayammum and pray, and that's done. This therefore shows and proves that it is not a condition necessarily to keep searching for the water up until the end time. Because a person may say that if Dhuhr enters at 12:30 and Asr enters at 2 p.m., that's 90 minutes. A person may say, well, in that case, 90 minutes, let's call it an hour at least. From 12:30 till 1:30, for an hour, let's keep looking for water. Then after an hour, if we don't find anything and there's only half an hour left, then it's getting risky now, then make tayammum and pray. But is that a necessity? Hadith indicates it's not. The time for the prayer enters at the beginning, 12 o'clock, 5 past 12, 10 past 12. You look around, you search, of course. Look around, search, you don't find anything anywhere. At the early time of the prayer, you can make tayammum and pray. It's not a condition. You have to keep searching up until you get to the point of no return, and then you have to make tayammum. The third issue here, في الحديث دليل على وقوع الاجتهاد في زمنه صلى الله عليه وسلم فإن هذين الصحابيين اجتهدا أحدهما لم يعد الصلاة والثاني أعادها. This indicates that the companions used to make ijtihad at that time. Ijtihad, and what is ijtihad generally in a nutshell? That you, based upon all of the evidences and knowledge available and the knowledge and evidences that you have, you attempt to deduce a ruling or infer a ruling from that. You make your ijtihad upon the issue. So they made ijtihad in that issue. One of them decided, well, we found water, the prayer time is still in, you should pray again. The other one decided, no, what we did was valid. We implemented the rulings, there was no water, so we made tayammum and we prayed. So he made his ijtihad upon that. So there was ijtihad of this nature at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And you remember the example regarding Bani Quraydah, when the Prophet ﷺ said to that group of them, do not pray Asr until you get to Bani Quraydah. So they hastened to get to Bani Quraydah, but they didn't make it until after Maghrib. But the Messenger has said to them, do not pray Asr until you get there. So some of them didn't pray until they got there, which was out of the time. Others, they said, no, the time, we gotta pray. We haven't made it. The Messenger did say, pray it there, but we haven't made it. The time's going. So some of them prayed en route. And again, that was ijtihad from them all, because some of them made the ijtihad that the Prophet meant literally, do not pray Asr until you get there. So they didn't, literally. Others, they understood, no, actually what the Messenger meant by that was, be quick. It's like a figure of speech. I don't want you to pray Asr until you're there. Meaning, get there, pray your Asr when you get there. Be quick and get there for Asr time. But if you don't, then obviously you've just got to pray. That's the ijtihad some of them made. So these are examples where this type of ijtihad did occur at the time of the companions. And there are other examples as well in hadith of ijtihad. These days when you talk about in fiqh or usul al-fiqh, when they talk about the levels of the scholars, and you have the faqih, and you have the mufti, and you have the mujtahid. They say in fiqh or usul al-fiqh, the mujtahid is of a certain level, and not anyone, not every scholar can be at the level of a mujtahid, let alone, mashallah, the students of knowledge. The scholars, some of them will not be at the level of mujtahid. The one who is at the level of mujtahid, they say in the usul al-fiqh, is the one who has grasped a wide range of the evidences, has a broad understanding covering the affairs. Because how can you make ijtihad on an issue if you don't know all of the evidences? You've got to have all of the basis laid out, then you can examine and come to a conclusion. If you don't even know what all of the narrations are in that particular topic, you don't even know what all of the evidences are in that particular topic, how are you going to make ijtihad on that topic? Hence, it is of a superior and high level. And they mention this, the levels of the fuqaha in the books of Usul al-Fiqh, and the mufti, what kind of characteristics are required of a person who is a mufti, the one who can give the fatwa. So these are levels of knowledge, and there is no doubt there are darajat, there are levels in that knowledge. Fourthly, في الحديث دليل على أنه لا يجب التلوم والانتظار إلى آخر الوقت. This is what we mentioned earlier, that it is not an obligation for you to keep looking for water until you get right to the end of the prayer time and there's no choice left. Then you make tayammum. It's not a condition for you to have to do that. The Shaykh says, فَإِذَا دَخَلَ وَقْتُ الصَّلَاةِ وَلَيْسَ عِنْدَ الْإِنسَانِ مَاء فَلَهُ أَنْ يُصَلِّي. If the time of the prayer comes in, and at that time you don't have water, you're out on a journey somewhere and the prayer time comes in, the location you have arrived at that moment in your journey, there is no water there available, you have no water, there's no water there. You can stop there, make tayammum and pray. You don't have to say, well, it's only the beginning time, let's carry on, maybe we'll find water. It's not a necessity. The time for the prayer comes in, you don't have water, the ruling becomes activated. That you can make tayammum and you can pray. ولا يلزمه تأخير الصلاة إلى آخر الوقت حتى يفقد الأمل من الحصول على الماء. So it is not necessitated for you to delay the prayer to the end time until you get to a point of no return and you believe there's no chance of finding water. أما إذا كان يرجو الحصول عليه بغلبة الظن فلا بأس في ذلك. However, what if you're traveling, you're on that journey, the time for the prayer comes in and you don't have any water there, nothing with you, nothing in that area where you have arrived on your journey. But maybe you've done that journey in the past. And maybe you remember that just past that valley, just past that tree and that mountain, there was some water last time. So now you believe that just ahead, another half an hour on, past that mountain it was, just past that hill, last time you went past there was water down there. So now what should you do? Time has entered, you don't have water in the location you're at, but you believe the previous time, a couple of kilometers down, there was some water. Can you pray right now because the conditions are valid? Time for prayer has come in, you don't have any water with you, there's no water here available. Can you pray now, or should you in that occasion, in that circumstance, delay then and carry on and check is there water where you think there is? You can do both, but which one? If you're in the journey, you're there, which one are you going to do? You're going to the water. Even though you think that last time when you went on the journey, you think from what you can remember, it was that little valley over there where there was water. The sheikh says, in that instance, because that's a bit different to the instance where you have no idea and you're just going to keep looking and looking. In this instance, if you overwhelmingly think that there is water available coming up, then you should go to it. So if you maybe, in this example we're giving, imagine you've done that journey before a couple of times, and from what you can vaguely remember, it was that hill coming up. There's a little lake that goes past it. From what you can remember roughly, and you're pretty certain it's that hill. So then in that case, where you're reasonably certain, you think it's pretty much that one there, then in that case, with that type of overwhelming suspicion that you are going to find water just over there, then you should delay the prayer, go there first. As long as you can reach that within the time of the prayer. You can get there in the next 20 minutes, half an hour, it's over there within the time of the prayer, and you overwhelmingly think that's where the water was last time. So then you should go there. You know you can make it there within the time of the prayer, and you have some reason to believe there is water there. That's different to a person going on that route for the first time, for example, has no idea where the water is. For him now the time enters, he can look, there's nothing there, make tayammum, pray. But in this other case, it's a person who isn't completely blind. He does have an idea where he thinks the water might be. Or it could be different reasons. He might see, for example, lots of birds flocking in the distance. For example, they're out in the desert somewhere and they see a large amount of birds flocking around up ahead. So they think, well, that only happens if there must be some source of water maybe. So maybe that is what creates the overwhelming suspicion in their mind that maybe there's water just there. All those birds, and we saw some animals up ahead. So again, you can delay, don't make tayammum, you can go then up to that point to see if that is the case or not. But where you have no other suspicion in any case, in any way, then khalas, the prayer time enters, you can make tayammum and you pray your prayer. If the person in these examples we've just been talking about, the person, for example, who'd been on that route before, and he thinks, I'm pretty sure the water was down there, or they see the birds and the animals, they think probably there might be water down there. But in both cases, they are not certain. In both cases, they are not certain. If you are certain, then it's as good as saying the water is available. If you're absolutely certain, exactly that tree, on the right of it, you can't see, but there's a big lake there. You're absolutely certain, then khalas, you got to go there. But in these cases, the examples we're giving, they are not absolutely certain. They see the animals, they think probably, but they don't know. The man looks at the route and he thinks, I think I know where we are. I think the water's over there. But he doesn't know for certain. So in those two cases, the Shaykh said, it's better then, if you're going to be within the time, still go and check. But can you decide though, as an Islamic ruling, that I'm just going to pray anyway? It looks like it could be that place. There are animals, there's this, that, but I'm just going to make tayammum and pray. Would the prayer be valid if you did that in that circumstance? It would still be valid. The prayer would still be valid. Because you don't have water. You think there might be some over there, but you have no certainty on that. So khalas, you can make tayammum and pray. The only thing the Shaykh is saying is, if it's within the time and the possibility to check out your suspicion is there, then go and do it. Maybe there is water and you can make wudu then. Then we move on to the next narration. وعن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما في قوله عز وجل وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر قال إذا كانت بالرجل الجراحة في سبيل الله والقروح فيجنب فيخاف أن يموت إن اغتسل تيمم. رواه الدارقطني موقوفا ورفعه البزار وصححه ابن خزيمة والحاكم. In this narration, it mentions that if a man has wounds and injuries upon him, open wounds from battle, perhaps from battle there are open wounds where the sword has gone in and the daggers have gone in, and he has injuries and wounds on him, open wounds in his body, and he fears that he may die if he was to make a ghusl, if he was to use water and it goes into all of those open injuries, deep cuts it could be with the swords and the daggers and the battle, and he fears putting water everywhere, water getting into all of these areas could even lead to his death because of the effect it would have on those injuries and the open wounds. Then in that case, the narration says the person can then make wudu. That is the example of the medical excuse for not being able to use water even if it's available. فابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما يفسر هذه الآية وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر. So the ayah in the Quran where Allah said, if you are sick or you are traveling, Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما was clarifying the meaning of this ayah. What does it mean if you are sick? So he gave this example. Perhaps the sickness is meaning the injuries and the wounds, and you're not able to use water on them. That is an example of a type of sickness. بأن المراد بها من كانت به جراحة في الجهاد في سبيل الله، يعني إصابة بسلاح أو حجر وغير ذلك، أو قروح وهي عبارة عن البثور التي تنبت في الجلد. So if a person has these wounds and injuries from battle, for example, from the swords and weapons, or from stones and other things, or he has certain types of like blisters and those kinds of things on his skin, certain types of boils or blisters or of that nature on his skin where water can't go onto it. You cannot put water onto your skin because of that ailment you have on your skin. Then in those cases, it would be considered an illness or an ailment that allows you to make tayammum instead. And we mentioned last time, what if that exists only on a particular body part? What if you have a huge wound on one hand, big open cut, and you can't put water on there, but everywhere else you're all good? So now what can you do as well? So the scholars, they say you can make wudu. All of the rest of your wudu, you can do it. The example we mentioned, somebody asked a few weeks ago, was when you have your tooth removed. If you have your tooth removed, they tell you don't put any water in there for a few hours or whatever it is. So now how are you supposed to wash your mouth out after you have a tooth removed? So the scholars, they say, in that case, medically then, you're not supposed to put any water in there, so don't. You're excused from putting water into your mouth when making wudu. But then, when you make all of the rest of the wudu, it means you've missed your mouth out, which according to the majority of the scholars is an obligation with your face. So in that case, the scholars, they say, make the full wudu for the rest of it, miss your mouth out, and make tayammum at the end on top. And that tayammum covers the body part that you couldn't use water with. Because in that instance, you don't need to make tayammum and that's it. You can make full wudu everywhere. It's just one body part you can't put the water onto. So they say make the full wudu. And for that one body part, you make tayammum and that covers for the body part that was missed at the end. So then here, it says, if you have this type of injury, ليس المقصود والمعني هنا الرجل الذي به جراح وقروح فحسب وإنما المعني جميع من به مرض. So it's not just wounds and injuries or skin conditions. It can be any type of illness. Any type of illness that would cause you harm in using water alongside that particular illness, then it is permissible, you're excused from the water and you can make tayammum. فَيُجْنِبْ. So in this hadith it gives the example, imagine somebody has these wounds and things and he goes into a state of janaba, perhaps a wet dream, etc. So now not only is it wudu, but with all these wounds he needs to make a full ghusl now. فَيَخَافَ أَنْ يَمُوتَ إِنِ اغْتَسَلَ. But he fears if he makes a ghusl with the state his body is in with the injuries and open wounds, etc. A ghusl and water going in everywhere, he could even die from that. Then in that case, tayammama, he's allowed to make the tayammum. يعني إذا استعمل الماء بأن يدخل الماء في جراحته أو في قروحه فيتأذى بذلك فيموت فإنه يعدل إلى التيمم. Does this mean therefore, because the narration says he fears he may die if he makes the ghusl, then he can make tayammum. Based upon that wording, it could possibly be understood that tayammum is only allowed in the extreme circumstance where you fear death from using the water. That's what the hadith says. If he fears death, then he can do tayammum. So does that mean anybody who's got minor injuries, minor cuts, it's going to sting a bit if the water goes in, but you're not going to drop dead? Then in that case, are you still allowed to make tayammum or not? Meaning if it is only a lesser type of illness, you're still going to be harmed. By using the water, it will still harm you and have a detrimental effect upon your health, but not any fear of death coming from it. So then can you make tayammum or not? Here the hadith seems to indicate it's only if you do fear. Death could even occur if you use it. However, the Shaykh says, هل المراد بأنه لا يعدل المريض إلى التيمم إلا إذا خاف على نفسه الموت؟ الجواب الظاهر أنه هكذا، أي إن المريض لا يعدل إلى التيمم إلا إذا خاف على نفسه الموت، والصحيح أنه لا. وجمهور أهل العلم بأن المريض إذا خاف على نفسه زيادة المرض باستعمال الماء أو خاف من تأخير الشفاء فله أن يتيمم. So the majority of the scholars have said though that if a person fears that his illness will increase, he'll get worse as a consequence of using water, then he doesn't have to use water, he can make tayammum. Or even if he does not fear becoming more ill, he's not going to become more ill by using the water. But by using water, it's going to affect his illness in the manner that it takes longer for him to get well. Two things. Using the water actually makes you more ill. Or secondly, using the water doesn't make you more ill. You remain as you are, but in terms of how quickly you can recover, that gets delayed. It pushes back your recovery. Doesn't make you worse, but pushes back your recovery. In both instances, it is permissible, therefore, to use tayammum instead of water. To make tayammum instead of using water. And that's the same ruling for fasting. When is a person who is sick allowed to miss fasting? Fasting coming up now, barely a few weeks left. When is a person allowed to miss fasting because of illness? Firstly, what type of illness? Let's start there. Illness that will what? So if you are going to be cured from the illness, you're not allowed to miss fasting? We're asking what kind of illness allows you to miss fasting? You have to take medicine, so if it's an illness where no medicine is required, you still have to fast. That's one way to look at it. Some of the scholars have mentioned that. An illness, some of the Salaf, they mentioned it too. There are different levels of illness. A person could have a headache. A little headache isn't going to stop you from fasting. A person might even have a slight cold. Doesn't necessarily stop you from fasting. Minor illnesses, minor ailments. You're riding your bike, you fall off, you make a huge gash on your knee. Doesn't necessarily stop you from fasting. There are lots of illnesses that could occur to you, but they don't stop you from fasting. An illness, some of the Salaf, they said, that stops you from fasting, and they gave some general examples. They said, if it's an illness that prevents you from leaving your home, then that is good enough to allow you to miss fasting. Meaning if you're ill, but you're not so ill that you can't just about put your coats on and wrap up and go to the corner shop to pick up some milk or something. You're not ill enough to be missing fasting if you're good enough to get out of your house. That's what some of them used to say. If you're good enough to manage to get out of your house, you're not ill enough to be missing fasting. So in other words, it's a bit like what they say these days, if you are bedridden, then okay, that's severe enough that you can miss your fasting. Basically, it's the same as this ruling here. Any illness, that is just an example that the Salaf used to give, but any illness whereby fasting will increase the severity of that illness, then you're allowed to miss. Or any illness where fasting will not increase the severity of it, but will delay your recovery from it, you're allowed to miss fasting as well. Same as this, same exactly. Any illness that will become worse if you fast, then you're allowed to miss. Or any illness that may not necessarily become any worse than you already are, But by fasting and not getting liquids and food, etc., it's going to add on another week to your recovery time, another 2 weeks, another month. By the time you recover because of lack of liquids and food, etc., then again you're allowed to miss the fasting. But if it doesn't come into those, then you're not allowed to miss the fasting for an illness. And that's why a minor headache or a minor cold and these kinds of minor things, they are not really a reason to be missing fasting. A headache, yes. If you drink your liquids, etc., often it's dehydration or whatever, maybe it recovers. But it's a minor thing, a small headache. We're not talking about migraines and things. A small headache, everybody gets a small headache now and again. Does that headache prevent you from getting up and going to work still? Everybody gets up and goes to work. Nobody misses work because of a headache. So these minor illnesses that are not going to harm you in any way, they don't increase necessarily by any reasonable or any realistic kind of measurement, or they don't prolong, then those types of smaller minor illnesses are not a reason to miss fasting. That's just in terms of the type of illness. As for the chronic illness and those things, that's the rulings that differ. If you have a chronic illness, a type of illness that, as they say in the books of fiqh, la yurja bur'uhu, a type of illness whereby you are not expected to recover from it ever. You are thought, the medics, they believe, and your diagnosis is that you are going to have this illness you've got for the rest of your life. This is how it's going to be. Every day you're going to have to keep taking these pills. You're not going to recover from this issue you've got now. It's going to be with you for the rest of your life. And if that issue is a type whereby you can't fast, then what are you going to do? You're going to miss this Ramadan, but you're also going to miss next Ramadan and the one after that, and all of them for the rest of your life, because they believe that this illness of yours is going to be with you now for the rest of your life. So then what are you supposed to do? You miss the fasting and you feed, do the feeding fidya. But as for the person yurja shafa'uhu or bur'uhu, a person who has an illness whereby it is anticipated that he will recover from it, then that person again can miss if those other conditions are in place, and he has to afterwards, when he recovers, make up those days. That's the difference in the ruling regarding them. So here it's those two. If a person fears using water will increase his illness or prolong the recovery period, then it is permissible for him to not use the water and to make tayammum instead. كما فعل عمرو ibn al-As, and there's this example of Amr ibn al-As in one of the narrations, radiyallahu anhu, whereby he had some medical issue, and as a consequence he feared using water would harm him from the coldness of the water, and so he made tayammum. Then after that, وعن علي رضي الله عنه قال انكسرت إحدى زندي فسألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأمرني أن أمسح على الجبائر. Here it's mentioned in this hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, he says that one of his arms broke. He broke his arm. He broke his arm. And when he broke his arm, those days and these days, you put a cast, some type of cast, the casting on top of that broken bone so that it can heal. So then it mentions in this narration that he broke one of his arms, and he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask him about the situation. He's now got one of his arms all wrapped up. How's he supposed to make wudu? So he came to the messenger to find out what to do. And again the Shaykh says, كما هو حال الصحابة أنهم إذا أشكل عليهم شيء يسألون النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This was the affair or the state of the companions. This is how they were. Anytime any issue came up, religious issue, they need a ruling, they would go to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him. They would return back to him and ask him, as Allah told us in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance, the people of knowledge, the scholars, the ulama, if indeed you do not know. So Ali radiallahu anhu, with his arm wrapped up now, didn't know how to make wudu, what to do here. He came to the messenger to ask him about that wudu and ghusl, how to make the purification with this body part wrapped up. So Ali radiallahu anhu says, فَأَمَرَنِي أَنْ أَمْسَحَ عَلَى الْجَبَائِرِ. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded me to wipe over the cast. To wipe over the cast. نعم. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أمر عليا أن يمسح على الجبائر بدل أن يغسل ما تحت الجبائر. So the messenger told Ali to wipe over the cast, and that you don't need to wash under. Obviously then, to take all of that off, these days the way they put it on, you can't take it off anyway. And in those days, to take it all off then and try and wash under, which technically if you have a broken bone, there's nothing wrong with the actual skin on top. You can put water on the skin on top. I assume the doctors will be okay with that. You can put water on top of the skin. The bone is broken inside. But the messenger here, Ali radiallahu anhu mentions, didn't tell him to take off the wrapping and put the water on top of the skin, which isn't going to affect the broken bone as such. But he said, just wipe over the top of the bandage. Wipe over the top of that cast instead. خفف عن نعم. وقد سبق لنا المسح على الخفين والمسح على العمامة. Previously, we've already covered the section about wiping over the leather socks or the other normal socks, and also wiping over the shoes and socks together. And what was the other item? The amama, the turban. If you've got a properly wrapped up turban, the ones that are fully entangled and wrapped up, then those ones you can't untie them all and then tie them back. In those ones that are fully properly tied up and entangled up, you can leave them and wipe over them. But as for the loose ones, any type of loose garment, even a loose turban that isn't wrapped up and tied up, then you remove that and do the proper wiping. But anything fully wrapped and tied and entangled, you can wipe over it. So the socks, the amama, and now the third thing which you're allowed to wipe over is the casts. Those casts for broken bones and the likes. خفف عن الأمة وشرع لها المسح على هذا الحائل بدلا عن غسل ما تحته فلو أن صاحب الجبيرة أزالها وغسل ما تحتها لتضرر وتأذى بذلك. So if a person who has a cast on, if the ruling was you have to get rid of that and you have to put water on top of the skin, that would of course be a great harm and a great difficulty upon the person with a cast on. So the ease that the religion has given us, that it is permissible to wipe over the cast. When we spoke about the leather socks and the socks, a person who is resident can wipe over them for how long? One day. A person who's a traveler. So what about the person with a cast? Broken arm gonna fix in 3 days? So there is no limit, obviously. You cannot limit that to a day or 3 days. It's impossible. Broken bones are going to take much longer than that. The cast is going to be on there much longer than that. So there is no time limit to this. There is no time limit to this. As long as you have that cast on and you are in need of wiping over it, then it is permissible to do so. Also, so that's one difference between the cast and the socks and the amama. Another difference is with the socks and the amama, it is permissible to wipe over them from which type of impurity? The minor impurity. If you are upon major impurity, you've got to. take off the amama, take off the socks and do a ghusl. You can't wipe over them for major impurity. Whereas this, a cast, again you can. You can. Because the cast, again, because of the difficulty and the removal, even the major, you need to have a ghusl, you can do a ghusl and then you just wipe over the cast area. The third difference, that the socks and the amama, to wipe over them, the prerequisite was that you had to have put them on in a state of purity, whereas a cast, if you were in an accident, la qaddar Allah, you get into an accident, you're unconscious, the ambulance comes and takes you, the next time you wake up, you've got 6 casts all over you, lying in the hospital bed. That's when you wake up. So now, maybe when you were driving the car and had the accident, you were not upon wudu. So you know now they put these casts on you in a state of non-purity. So now what? Are you going to have to tell them, take them all off, I got to make wudu first, then put them on? So that's why the scholars, they say, upon the most authentic opinion on that issue, that of course, that is a type of necessity. Now, if you got into that kind of situation, then you can still pray and wipe over it, even though it was put on in a state where you may not have been upon purity. The fourth difference is with the socks and the amama, when you wipe over the socks, you just go over the top. You don't have to go all around wiping them all. And the amama, you don't have to go all around again, you just go over the top. The cast, though, everywhere on it. You get the water and you wipe all around the cast. Not just go over the top of it and that's it. It's all around it, fully, as opposed to the socks where you just go over the top. We have the final couple of narrations here. In fact, hadith number 136 is what we've mentioned before. When you have one body part, that is affected only, then the rest of the body, you can make your normal purity, your normal wudu, your normal whatever, the normal washing. And just that one body part that is affected, you can either wipe if it's a cast, or if it was like the example of the mouth and the tooth, then you make tayammum to cover it. And the final narration in this chapter from Ibn Abbas, Mina Sunnah, he said, from the Sunnah is that أَلَّا يُصَلِّيَ الرَّجُلُ بِالتَّيَمُّمِ إِلَّا صَلَاةً وَاحِدَةً ثُمَّ يَتَيَمَّمْ لِلصَّلَاةِ الْأُخْرَى. That from the Sunnah is that a person should only pray one prayer per tayammum. So if you're on that journey again at dhuhr time, you look around, no water, you make tayammum, you pray dhuhr. You're still traveling, Asr time comes in where you've arrived now, still no water anywhere. So now, according to this narration, you're supposed to make tayammum again and pray Asr. Not just say, but I'm upon purity from the previous tayammum, I haven't broken my wudu in any way, I'm upon that previous tayammum still. According to this narration, next prayer now, you're starting from scratch. You look for water again, no water, make tayammum again and pray. 1 second. So that's what this narration seems to indicate. That you have to refresh the tayammum for the next prayer. هذا الحديث يدل على أن حكم التيمم ينتهي بالصلاة وأنه إذا أراد أن يصلي صلاة أخرى فلا بد من تيمم آخر وهذا يؤيد قول من قالوا إن التيمم مبيح للصلاة ليس رافعا للحدث. According to this opinion then, that if you get to the time of Asr now, start from fresh. Look for water, no water, make tayammum again and pray. According to that position, it's upon the opinion that tayammum is only a temporary measure. It was a temporary measure that you used at dhuhr. It's not something constant. Temporary measure you used at dhuhr. Now asr time, again you look for water, you can't find any. Again you can now use the temporary measure again. So make tayammum again. Whereas the other opinion which says it is rafi'un lil hadath, that when you make tayammum it removes your state of impurity just as wudu does. Which means once you've made tayammum, it's exactly the same as somebody who's made wudu. You are upon a state of purity. According to that opinion, if at dhuhr time you did it and then you're journeying, asr time you find no water, you can just pray because you're already upon purity from your previous tayammum, because they believe it removes the hadath just as normal wudu does. That brings us to the end of the section regarding tayammum.
The question is the Imām. Sometimes I do Imām and I move little bit because I want to wash my.
It mentions that when we covered it last time, the nasiyah, the forelock, that the messenger used to touch the forelock and then go onto and above the amama. That is mentioned in some narrations to do it like that.
And this opinion, you say only tayammum for one salah. If the salah is jum'ah, like when you are in journey and no water, you have to do jum'ah. What about this time?
I don't remember. Allah alam what they say about that, because that is the opinion of the mubih lis-salah. Allah alam. We'll have to look into their madhahib and see what they say, whether they say both of these prayers are allowed because they are the jama', so it's as though it is together. So maybe they'll say, okay, that one tayammum covers them both, but maybe they'll say no, they are two independent prayers and you got to do it twice. Allah alam. I don't remember which one they say about that. Somebody else had a question?
You answered.
Oh, okay.
Just on that note, if you're on a journey and you combine your two prayers, can you combine even if you're going to get home before the second one starts?
It is permissible. Imagine if you're on a journey somewhere and you get to Maghrib time. So upon the examples of these days then, 4:30 these days. So imagine at 4:30 p.m. you're out journeying somewhere and you know you're going to get back here to the mosque by 7:45 p.m. You'll be here. You can be back in Bradford by then. So you can be back in Bradford for the Jama'ah time of Isha. But at 4:30, you're still in the middle of your journey. At 4:30, you're still down near Leicester somewhere, 2 hours away from Bradford yet. You can combine your Maghrib and Isha down there, even if you're going to get back to Bradford at 7 p.m. So you can even make it to the Jama'ah in Bradford. You're allowed to combine because the rules are in place. You are currently in the act of journeying and you have not yet arrived back to your hometown. As long as you're in the act of journeying and still outside of your hometown, it is permissible. However, as Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen says, in that kind of circumstance, it's better to pray your Maghrib and pray your Isha when you get back in the Jama'ah then. You know you can make it, you're back in your hometown by that time, even if it's not the Jama'ah, but you'll be back before the end of that prayer time. Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen does have an opinion that you should leave that then until you get back and pray it full. You're going to be back before the prayer time exits. But it's not a condition. You're a traveler, you're allowed to combine out there.
Is there a difference if you do that journey every day, so for work, for example?
There isn't. If a person is a traveler, he is a traveler. Even if it is daily for work, it is permissible. You are on a journey, you're on a journey.
So let's say you've prayed your Isha, but you come to the masjid and you're praying Jama'ah. Can you pray again with the Jama'ah?
Nafal. You pray again, you make your intention of nafal. and you get the reward of praying in the Jama'ah. But you don't make the intention of Isha again. Muadh ibn Jabal used to pray with the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet used to lead the prayer for Isha, Muadh ibn Jabal used to pray in the congregation. Then after the prayer finished, he would then go to his area where he lived, and then he was the Imam of his area. He would go and be the Imam in his local mosque, wherever he lived, and lead the Isha prayer. But how can he lead the Isha prayer when he was praying in the Jama'ah behind the Messenger? He already prayed his Isha. So then he would pray, lead his own people in his area with the intention of Nafal, and everybody behind is praying the intention of Fard Isha. So you can't repeat the prayer, you make Nafal the second time. Both technically upon the rulings would be possible. It's possible. You can do both either way, as long as you're not repeating the Fard. Yeah, these are differences. In the books of fiqh, they talk about these differences. Some of them say both hands together. Some of them say you can do one hand. The sifa of how you do it, there are some different opinions about it. If you do both together, no problem. It's correct. It's valid.
How many, for example, in the example of the cast, when you're with the left part of the body 3 times, and you get to do the mask, only one?
No, that's only once. Wiping all the way around it once. You don't have to wipe that 3 times.
I think you mentioned this last time, but just for clarification, when you miss a body part, you do your wudu and you do tayammum after. Is that for a part that you completely missed? So for the mouth, you completely missed the mouth, so you do tayammum after. But when you wipe over your arm, you don't do tayammum after
over the cast.
Yeah.
No, you don't, because the rest of that. So imagine your cast is on your elbow here. So now your hand part, you're going to wash it, and maybe at the top of the cast there's a bit of the elbow. You can wash that, and then you wipe that. So now you've completed the full part. You wash the areas that are exposed, and you wipe the areas that are under the cast. That's the full part done now. No, for that one the Messenger said, Asabta Sunnah. You've implemented, you've carried out the Sunnah, and it's valid what you've done. But the other one was told, you have 2 rewards, meaning what you did in repeating it, it's correct and you get the reward for it, but it's not a necessity.
The one who asab sunnah is the one who gets more.
That is the position you should take. Asabta Sunnah, so that's the position you would take as a default. If you're in that situation, then that is sufficient. You wouldn't need to repeat it. Anybody else? All right.
In the case of the one who prayed, who have already prayed Jama, and he gonna repeat the prayer being nafal. My question is, if you are doing nafal, for example, the example of the Sahaba doing reading Isha, you're gonna have to do the 4 rakat without ending.
Yeah, 4 rak'at, it's okay. Yeah.
Generally, you can do nafal without.
No, normally it's in 2s, but there are examples when you can do more than that. In the night prayer, the tahajjud, there are examples when you can pray 4 rak'at all in one go. There is a sunnah you can pray 7 and then do tashahhud at the end. There are these different examples that are valid.
Off topic, if that's okay. Alcohol in medicinal products. What's the ruling on that?
It depends on what they talk about, the nisbah, about the proportion of it, and would a large amount of that alcohol be intoxicating or not. If you were to drink tons of that medicine, would you become intoxicated? A lot of it revolves around whether a large proportion of that would be intoxicating or not. But again, if a person wants to be safe, you try to use medicines that wouldn't have those types of thing in it, and then you get all the questions about perfumes with alcohol as well. Then there's the issue of whether alcohol is haram because of its content or its makeup, meaning that if you spill alcohol on your garments, are they now impure? Difference of opinion. Because some scholars say alcohol as a liquid isn't impure. If it goes in your garments aren't impure, but it's impure in terms of drinking it. But others, they say no, it's impure altogether. If it goes on you, it's impure as well. So then it's going to have different rulings on whether you can use it in perfumes and these things. So with medicines, it's going to be about the intoxication, whether a large amount of it intoxicates. If it doesn't, that tiny proportion of whatever alcohol they put into it, if you were to drink huge amounts of that, if it wouldn't intoxicate you, then it's not a problem.
Huge amounts of the whole medicine, yeah? So if it's got small amount of alcohol in it, we look at the whole medicine. Like if you was to drink the whole medicine, then it wouldn't intoxicate you. Is that
Yeah.
So the question about if you can combine prayers, if you've made tayammum, if you're following the opinion that it removes the impurity completely and it's a substitute for wudu, then in that case,
Now, khalas, you're a free man. Then you can combine, do what you want. You're upon wudu. You don't have to think about any of the rulings then. You are upon wudu just like the one next to you who had water. If you believe it's rafi'un lil hadath.
and that is a stronger opinion, right? That it's
Maybe. Those ones are, if you look in the books of fiqh and the explanations, there's a lot on both sides. They're not, you'll get scholars saying this is the stronger opinion, then you look in the other book and they'll say this is the stronger opinion. Those ones are a bit difficult, but it would appear so, Allah alam. Salamatullah.
I've got an elderly family member who's pretty much bedridden and has incontinence issues. So they have to wear as a result, they're not staying in wudu and they're not praying the salah. What is the ruling for them to be able to clean themselves sufficiently to pray?
Are they able to clean themselves?
They can't go to the bathroom unassisted, so once a day somebody goes there to help them to the bathroom, help them clean themselves. And usually it's in the evening.
If a person is in that kind of state, then they are supposed to, if possible, with their family members, everybody, they are supposed to go and aid them to purify themselves. Let's say they're in a situation where that isn't possible. They're in some medical setting or whatever, and they only come and help them once a day. Then the rest of the day, they still pray as they are. If they have absolutely no other way, they can't clean themselves, they can physically not get up and go to the bathroom themselves, and the setting that they're in, and there's no other family members, that extreme situation. In that extreme situation, they would pray as they are, even with the impurity. There is nothing you can do then. You pray as you are. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. It comes to in the extreme situation.
Sorry, but in that situation, do they just make tayammum?
Yeah, if they can't move off their bed, they can't do anything else, they do to the best of their ability, whatever is able for them, whatever is possible for them.
What's the strongest position on what defines a traveller in terms of?
Again, what defines a traveler, there are so many opinions. Some of them have actual figures. So there is a figure, like Sheikh bin Baz mentioned, when you work out the marahil and everything, it works out about 49 miles. 49 miles, 50 miles, thereabouts, 80 kilometers. That is an opinion. There are other opinions which are far less than that, like barely 2 or 3 miles. There are some opinions on that. There are opinions saying if you leave your city, so if you go outside of Bradford, outside of the BD, then you are now a traveler. It mentions in the books of fiqh, when you leave your city and you look back and you can see the buildings of your city. You're out on the road now, you look back and you can see the buildings of your city behind you. You're now outside of your city, you're a traveler. So there's lots of different opinions. One of them is the urf, which is a strong opinion, I believe. The custom and the tradition of the people. So in the custom of the people, what is considered a journey? We've had these discussions many times with people over the years. If people in Bradford, they believe going over to Shipley, round the corner over there, even though Shipley technically is Bradford anyway, but going from this area to that area, but the people in Shipley don't believe they are Bradford, you know that. If you ask somebody in Shipley, so you're from Bradford? No, I'm from Shipley. So if you go to Shipley, that area there, if the people from here, this is BD what? BD7. You go from BD7 to Shipley. Do people in BD7 believe going to Shipley is a journey? Ask anybody in BD7, I'm going to Shipley today. Are they going to say, Shipley? You're going all the way down there. Is anybody going to behave like that? So in the custom of the people, you know that going to Shipley is not a journey. But if you say to somebody, I'm going to Edinburgh tomorrow, now people are going to say, oh, Edinburgh, oh, well, what's going on? Why are you going there? What's happening? Because everybody in their mind now believes that's a journey, that's a long way. Why are you going there? What's happening? So in the custom of the people, you know Edinburgh is a journey without doubt. So there are customs to where people can recognize what is a journey or not. How can you tell? How can you define a custom? There are certain signs sometimes. Like the scholars, they say, imagine now you go from here to Shipley. You get in your car, you turn on the engine, you drive. If you're going to go from here down to Southampton, you pack a little bag, you're going to pack some snacks, you're even going to maybe check the tire pressure, the air pressure, you'll maybe check the oil level, you'll maybe do a little couple of bits and bobs before you head off down to Southampton. You do all of those little bits and bobs because in your mind you know now you are going on a journey. Nobody would bother checking their tire pressure, you're going to drive to Shipley. So in your mind, in the minds of the peoples, with the actions that they do, it indicates what you're thinking. If you pack a little sandwich and little snacks and things now, in your mind you're doing that because you know you're going to be going on a journey, on a long distance. When you don't bother with any of those things, then you can tell in the custom and mind of the people it's not a journey. And that's why, from here even to Leeds, some of the brothers may view that as a journey. It's technically a different city. It's technically outside. It's possible the opinions could apply. But if you think about the urf and the custom of the people, you say to somebody in BD7, I'm going to Leeds. I don't think, Allah alam, maybe people want to argue over it, but I don't think anybody's going to think that's a journey. Pack your sandwiches. Your mothers aren't going to say to you, let me prepare something for you. It's a long way, Leeds. Something could happen on the way. Nobody thinks like that. So in the custom of the people, it's not a journey. But on some of the other opinions and things, it could be. So on the customs, that's a strong way to work out what a journey is, because mentally you know in the tradition how far is a journey, how far isn't.
If you're traveling with an elderly parent or grandparent in an aeroplane, and although it's easy for you to do wudu by just, maneuvering yourself in the small water in there, but it's difficult for the elderly parent or grandparent to do it. In that case, can they do tayammum, although the water is available to them?
Then that would come into the second category where water is available but you're unable to use it. So are they genuinely in a situation where they are unable to use the water? I think it's maybe a bit difficult to prove that on an aeroplane setting. On an aeroplane setting, it's maybe a bit difficult to prove that it's difficult to use the water. I mean, there's enough. I mean, standing up to all those, the only difficulty will be the feet. The rest of it, khalas, you're standing up there, you can do everything standing up, nothing wrong. It's just the feet that may be a difficulty. But again, if preparation was made, they made wudu before the flight, put their socks on before the flight. Now on the flight, they don't need to wash their feet or anything, they can just wipe. Go into the bathroom, do everything else, just step out, give yourself space and wipe. So I think it's difficult to try and prove that water cannot be used in an aeroplane setting. That's true. Tayammum may be difficult, you can't find a speck of dust in there. Yeah, you can. If a person was unable to make wudu, imagine you got a relative in hospital, something's happened to them, they're lying down in their bed, they can't move. If you're there visiting, it's the time for the prayer, you can bring the water, you can put it on your hand, and you can wipe your hand over their body parts and make wudu on them. That's possible. It can be done. A cloth? I don't know about using a cloth like that. Because wudu, it is supposed to be directly done. Allah alam about using a cloth. Alright, we'll conclude upon that for today then. Inshallah ta'ala, in 4 weeks' time, we'll continue with the next section, which is now the section of menstruation. So encourage all of the female folk, the wives, daughters, mothers, encourage them to attend from next time. We'll go over that section regarding all the rulings on periods and postnatal bleeding and menstruation, inshallah.